Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Jill and Stacy's show, and we have our first guest today. Her name is Lynne Taylor. And Lynne, if you want to give us an introduction to who you are and what you're all about.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, ladies, and congratulations on the new platforms and the new show. And as soon as I say a little bit about myself, I'm going to turn the tables and ask you ladies a question. So, anyway, my name is Lynne Taylor, as Jill said, and I'm otherwise known as Common Core Diva. I joke about that's my alter ego. And the reason I joke is because it's a very, very serious matter what's going on in education, not only in America, where we really have a say in it, but what we're seeing happen everywhere. And so I got started about, 2008, 2009. My girls were getting ready. My oldest was getting ready to graduate from high school, and I wanted to know what was out there. And so I was able to find some support group leaders because I was a homeschool parent and community leader and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to find out what was out there, not only to help protect my girls and to arm them, because I knew that there's only so much I can do to raise them. And then beyond that, it's up to them. But I knew there were several families that I was helping to mentor and to lead and all this other kind of stuff. And so I found some articles written by Tom DeWeese, who's with the American Policy Center. And it was for the UNESCO push for the global standards in education. And then there was one by Kathy Duffy, and she does curriculum reviews, and she was talking about how it was starting to infiltrate homeschooling. And I thought, well, if it's infiltrating homeschooling, as a leader, it is my due diligence to find out how so that I can help start warning people, arm them. And that's how I got started in researching and writing and speaking and blogging. And there you go. I have a question for you, though. How did you ladies come up with, hey, we need to do a show to help people use their brains?
Stacey, do you want to start?
Yeah, there is so much going on just in the world in general, but what is affecting our children and what they're going through every day. And what I hear from a lot of conservatives is just pull your kids out of school. And as much as I would love for that to be possible, it's not possible for every family to do that and homeschool or send their child through private education. So the battle for me started when our schools implemented Summit, which is a Facebook platform. And we had to research and find information on this program because the schools were not able to answer any of our questions.
Right.
At the end of the day, we found it was implemented illegally. And trying to get this information out, the schools were censoring parents on all the posts that they were posting about it. They were trying to isolate us back then, so we couldn't find each other and unite and form groups. So this platform is the opportunity to educate the public, give them a battle plan to fight for their children, and help them find the people that they can join with to be successful in getting our country back and getting our children's minds back and unifying these groups so that we can be successful in those endeavors.
Very good. All right. Jill, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, my journey started when my 8th grader came home and said, Mom, I watched an LGBTQ video today in an ELA class. And I said, really? You did? So I asked the teacher and asked the principal, and they just kind of blew it off like, yeah, no big deal. So the more I researched, I figured out there's a curriculum out there called, it's critical race theory, but they're using a different term called social emotional learning. It's a little bit, it's fluffier, it feels better, but it's the same, it's the same thing. It's, yeah. So basically I took him, long story short, I took him out of school. I'm homeschooling him now. He has a better attitude. He's done a 180. He actually enjoys algebra now, and he's doing so much better mentally and school-wise. He's doing better, and I feel like he's getting almost a better education because I have more of a control over it. And he's learning about the Constitution. He's learning about the Bill of Rights. He's learning about all this stuff that they should be learning, but they're learning about how to be comfortable in their own skin and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm fine with that, but I don't think it needs to be in school. That's a conversation that needs to be had between parent and child, not at school.
Right. Right. But we've seen our government for years, ladies, take this over, take the parental role away from the parent and say, no, the minute that your child crosses from your car onto our property, we're their parent, we're their judge, we're their jury, we're their nanny, we're their teacher, we're their everything. And that's wrong, absolutely wrong. But we've had so many parents for so many years be propagandized into believing that only a certain set of people can properly educate, when we know that's poppycock. I mean, if you happen to be a person who reads the Bible, you will see we were charged as the parents to be the one to give them that character development, to give them those skills, to give them all the foundation that they would need, that we're now seeing the school take over in this social and emotional learning, because they've come at it from, oh, well, we need to educate the whole child. Well, this is such rot, because it's not the school's job. And we are seeing, since Common Core rolled out, especially, that the push for anything that was outside of tradition, like you've already mentioned, was up for grabs. Okay. Because tradition was dull, it was boring, it was old, it's not working, it hasn't worked. Well, if that's the case, then answer me why we had so many people come through that type of education who went to invent, or went to the moon, or went and did things that no one else has done. Have we seen that happen in the generation since Common Core rolled out? Not near as much, because their brains are being reshaped literally. And I've seen the brain scans that prove a child who had no Common Core whatsoever, their brain was as it needed to be. And then I've seen one go through the Common Core, and certain parts of the brain that need to be there are underdeveloped, are missing.
Glad you brought up about the parents' rights, because that's something that we're all seeing when we don't have the choice of whether or not we cover our children's airwaves when they're in a building all day. They're telling us that it's up to the school board. And this is just the beginning of what we're about to see roll out when you're talking about the whole child, what exactly they're wanting to implement this agenda. And people don't realize also it's global. This is a global education plan. It's been in the works for decades. It's in the UN Agenda 21, UN Agenda 2030, World Economic Forum. Zuckerberg's very much part of that as well with his metaverse. There's a much larger agenda to what's going on, but the parents are not going to be involved in any of it. They want to cut the parents out and not have rights for the parents to decide what is taught to your child, how it's taught to your child, and their medical, mental health, all of it's being taken over.
Yeah. And the Every Student Succeeds Act had a lot to do with cementing much of that in place that had never been in place before. It took the Title I funding that was supposed to be for the individual children who needed that Title I funding for student services or for whatever, okay? And it made it whole school, so that anyone in the school could be tested for behavior management, behavior interventions, mental health assessments that were not necessarily run by qualified professionals who were trained in mental health diagnosis and treatment. So yeah, and we're seeing this happen not only in our public schools, but we're seeing the public schools turned into hubs for neighborhoods that will impact the community, because as research has shown us before, especially through the Promised Neighborhood program, that every neighborhood needed to look a certain way and be filled with a certain number of people, and they needed to look like this and act like this, and this is how much they could make, and this is where they worked. And it just was taking every bit of your freedom away from, hey, I want to live where I want to live, that sort of thing. So it's an attack not only on parents' rights, but on your individual rights. And we know that impedes our God-given rights, that impedes the Civil Rights Act on several levels in several versions, and it also violates our children's privacy. Now, let me just point out one little quick thing, and then I'll let you guys have it back. The HIPAA that everyone says, oh, well, that's going to protect my child's data privacy. No, Obama gutted that with an executive order. Before that executive order, your child's data was a lot safer than it is now. But because he opened Pandora's box with that executive order, which, by the way, was unconstitutional, as is every one of them if they are outside of the executive office. But with that change in the HIPAA, the data, and this was one of the questions that you guys had, was the data, instead of just staying in the school where the child was going, suddenly it's open to anyone and everyone with a data contract, big tech, big pharma, big medicine. You've even got grad students who are allowed to have access to your child's data if they're doing research and thesis to help somewhere in education or healthcare.
Is there a name attached to it, or is it anonymous?
As far as what, Jill?
So for instance, if they're doing a research paper and they have access to this data, is your child's name available, or is it generic?
Supposedly it's generic data, but as far as I am concerned, when you have a school board that's telling you, oh no, this is where the data stops, and then you do those freedom of information accesses and you find out the layers of contracts that are at least 15 layers deep, there's no telling what they're really expressing. It might very well have your child's name attached to it. In some states, that does happen. In others, it's, well, this is Johnny, no, this is, male or female, this number of age, and so on and so forth. But that's a very interesting question. And, we're not always privy to what grad student it is because, their rights are protected, but here your child's are just open for everyone. FERPA, the Family Education Right to Privacy Act, has been messed with too, especially in the name of COVID.
I would actually like to ask you about the Google apps that they're using, Google Classroom and the Chromebooks, because I know that when my child did virtual school last year, which a lot of kids are doing, he had to have a Gmail account, and his account was his first dot his last name at the school he goes to. And as far as privacy and it not including your child's name, there's no guarantees with Google in particular and these apps that they use where that information goes and who they're sharing that information with. But my bigger concern was when I found out Google was actually started by DARPA and is a military operation. So it's not just a data mining company. But I wanted to ask you more specifically about these Chromebooks and what parents can do to navigate the use of Google and the Chromebook, because we're seeing it at one-to-one Chromebooks everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why you're seeing the one-to-one Chromebooks everywhere, Dell does a program as well as Apple, but usually Google is the one that really pumps them out there. The point of it is that the more, and this is the selling point, the more access your student, whether it's in special needs under an IEP or it's a child who is, say, in a hybrid school or one who's in a public school, or let's say, you're a homeschooler, but you're using public school courses and curriculum, which does happen. Any one of those subgroups will have access to these because the selling point was, well, Johnny and Susie will be able to have more access to their homework. But what they didn't tell you in the sales job was, oh yeah, the minute that device, whether it's a Chromebook, a tablet, or a cell phone or whatever, is going to be able to snoop on your entire family. Now, I did a show out of Ohio, and one lady called in and told me I was a big fat liar over this because I said, it's been able to access some parents' bank accounts. If you want to think I'm blowing smoke, that's absolutely your choice, but it has been proven that it got into a parent's bank account and it was the child's school issued Chromebook. So my biggest thing would be refuse the Chromebook. We've had parents in Florida who have said, you know what? I understand Johnny and Susie might be behind in some of their assignments, but give me pen and paper or pencil and paper, especially with the assessments. Now, a lot of the schools will not do it, and here's why. Because with all the data systems that are coming in, all those daily algorithms, and I think somewhere along the way, ladies, the number of algorithms per minute that are assessed on anyone, and I've seen my husband have this happen to him at his work when he sat down to take a continuing education course. The number of data points that are pulled in off those algorithms based on how you answer the question are in the millions. The personal private data information that is harvested off of each and every one of us, whether we're on a Zoom call, a Google, whatever, we're on a classroom or whatever, is in the, let's see, I think it's over 4 million personal private data points are harvested, and it's under international internet standards governed by the United Nations.
Ugh.
I would also like to point out that the internet was started by CERN, and people should really research what they do at CERN, and that's CERN.
Yeah. Well, Stacy, give them a little teaser, because this is what I find out is a great way to get parents interested in, okay, this is what I need to be honing in on my own research and where I need to get unified with other people. So give them a little bit more about what CERN does.
The Hadron Colliders, a global scale, trying to open portals. They have created antimatter by finding what is the glue that holds all life together. I always talk to people about CERN and tell them to start going down that rabbit hole of what they admit that they are doing, and how terrifying that is. Who started our internet? If they started it, what are they doing with it now? Where are we going now? Because how long ago was this even rolled out?
Yeah.
And how much information is released to the public when it's already been done for a decade?
Well, I do know that a lot of the roots, and I don't know if there's, because I didn't even look into this, but it just hit me. I know that IBM back in the 30s was just getting started with all their data collection. So they were able to stack the concentration camps with certain people based off of that data. So the Holocaust was in part not just Germany's fault, but IBM. And they've gone on to do the same thing with apartheid in Africa, and look at what they're doing to our education system here in America in 2022.
Mm-hmm. And the data is what the machine's going to run off of, because that's where the companies make the money. The data is the oil now.
Yep.
We're living in those days.
That's the new liquid gold. Yep. Because you're worth more as a data point than you are as a living, breathing human being.
Right.
Yep.
What is RTI 2.0 and that teachers are being trained towards? Okay, so RTI stands for response to intervention, which is every bit of that social and emotional learning, and every bit of the social and emotional learning that has been inserted into American education through CASEL, which is out west somewhere, and that stands for Consortium of Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And every bit of their research comes off the master plan for the United Nations Global Education. And they have a guide, I think it was out last year, and I did an article on it. And it was like a 300-page document. But in that document, it was laying out, oh, yes, we need to manipulate attitudes, values, and beliefs, because you can't be a good conformist to globalism if you're still thinking independently. And the reason why you're going after second and third graders is because, and you can thank Lamar Alexander from the state of Tennessee for this one. He stood in front of the National Governors Association in the early 80s, or maybe it was the late 80s. I've seen the clip, and you probably have too. But he stood in front of every one of those governors, and he said, one day we're going to be able to go to the hospital as the mother is having the child, and we will be able to give them government support and government care. And we will be able to track them from the time that child is born to the time that they die. It's what's called cradle to grave. Okay. But part of that entailed controlling their education, which is what this social and emotional garbage is doing, because it is taking and saying, okay, these globalist views are more important than mom and dad's family values. They're more important than God himself. They're more important than what you may start to be thinking as well. Because again, you have to be conformed to the Sustainable Development Goals to be a worthy citizen.
I'm glad you brought that up. And in 2018, they wrote the article, The First Blockchain Baby, where they followed the baby in utero before the baby's even born, measuring biometrics, global identity, so that it can be housed on the blockchain.
Yep, that's it.
Really
that's
glad
it.
you brought that up.
And if you want to have someone who is very knowledgeable on blockchain on your show, that she could really help people understand and connect the dots. Her name is Allison McDowell. She writes a blog called Wrench in the Gears, and she has made it her mission to expose how dangerous the blockchain is, not only for education, but for just being alive.
It's a military operation.
Oh, absolutely it is. And I have had the honor of having a former military person give me documents into the plans for the internment camps that are being set up now for COVID. But part of the information also dovetails back into blockchain. So that's how we met, was through Allison. They're no longer on speaking terms, but that information was very valuable, because one of the things that you had in your questions is what am I currently focusing on? Well, I don't know if you've seen it, and I'll be happy to send you the link via email if you want. And that is the state of Washington is setting up a proposal to a health standard that's on the books that was only created in 2019, just months before the first COVID case was diagnosed, to set up involuntary internment camps for Washington citizens as young as 5 years old and their families, all the way through if they refuse the experimental vaccine mandate. So the reason I'm bringing that up is the state of Washington, through the health department, is holding a Zoom meeting on the 22nd, I believe it is. No, the 21st. I'm so sorry. They will have it. Yes. And what they want is citizen input as to whether this is a good thing or whether this is a bad thing. Well, I can tell you, having already done the research for these internment camps for those who are exercising their freedom, they are very much alive. They are very much being put into place, if not already into place. So with the danger in this is you've got a state where the first case was diagnosed that wants to change this healthcare law that was just set into place months before that first case. But you also have in DC, I think it is a representative who has just rolled out a bill that marries into this. Let me see. I just brought that up yesterday on an interview that I did. Oh, yes, it's HR 5469. It's the Foster Act, and it would amend the 21st Century Cures Act. Now, it says it's targeting opioid abuse in children, but it's that other purposes clause, ladies, where we need to be very, very concerned, because anytime a federal congressional bill uses the phrase other purposes, they're going to use it to open Pandora's box. So if you've got a healthcare standard that was just rolled out months before the first case, and now you have these internment camps that are being set up, and now you have a representative from Washington proposing this, do you see a pattern? And this is one thing parents can do, is they can get on that Zoom meeting. They can find, even if you don't live in the state of Washington, they are asking for public input.
And what was the date on that?
Let's see. It is the 21st of January. and I have the link to the article detailing, showing the actual standard, pointing out the date of when it was created. And now here they are coming, not even a year later, saying, oh, yes, we need to amend it. And the scary thing about the amendment is that it would give not only the healthcare system the right to inter you, but any police officer, peace officer, or security person, they could do it too. And we have those in schools.
Well, I've noticed in our state, they keep talking about wanting public input and forming coalitions. There's even a local coalition. However, I'm finding when I look up that who is in these coalitions, it's a lot of nonprofit organizations.
It's the Delphi technique. And if you don't know what the Delphi technique is that's where they create a problem. They invite you in, have you think you're giving input that will be used to make a solution, but then they trot out a solution they already made. And with those nonprofits, absolutely. I can tell you from researching, it is not hard to find where the money is, and where the money is, that will be where the agenda is.
Yep.
One of our questions had to do with the LGBTQ, the programming that they're using for that. I just watched Glenn Beck go over how they are now adjusting sex ed to elementary school and tailoring it to elementary school students now as well.
Right. They've been doing that for a couple of years. Well, let me see here. That is part of the globalization as well, because we all have to be tolerant. We all have to just, accept that, hey, whatever works is okay. And that really is not cool. It's not the way things are supposed to be. But again, truth is being attacked. Families are being attacked, because if you're the traditional family, somehow you're now the enemy. Well, that's that social justice that goes in with the social and emotional learning. Now, we know there's a true justice. We know that there's social behavior, but social justice takes it a step further, and it makes a militant attitude and a bully pulpit for those who are preaching whatever it is. In other words, if you don't agree with what I think and say, and I'm now out there saying, this is me, then I have to make you think like me, act like me, look like me. That's not freedom. That is absolute militant, communist thinking. But the reason why part of the reason why we're seeing it is not only is it part of the global agenda, but it is from our federal government. They are the biggest pimps out there. If you look at the pedophilia that is in government, be it at federal, state, or local, it's off the charts. And when you have a congressional caucus that is their only agenda, is to push the alternative lifestyles and the alternative sexualities, is that representing the people? It might be, but it's representing the special interest.
Right.
It absolutely is. So yeah, we've got tons of legislation out there, especially from DC, that is pushing, yes, we have to do this. Yes, we have to do this. And this is where the parents are going, no, we don't have to. It should be our choice if we want to, but it shouldn't be the government telling us we must, and we certainly shouldn't be doing it before they even understand what their belly button is.
That's what we have noticed is the schools that are implementing these programs are confusing the kids and sexualizing them, because they're introducing conversations and concepts around sex that these children do not need to understand at their age. But then it's confusing them, and then they're saying that, these children can decide for themselves what gender they are.
Right.
I mean, how confusing for little kids.
Well, it's confusing for me. I mean, I'm still scratching my head. How is this supposed to work? But there it is. But yeah, there was a reason why we were developmentally spaced as God intended, was because, from birth to 5. That's the most nurturing time of the parent and the child. And what are we seeing happen? It's so messed with, it's not even funny. You've got daycare centers that are pushing this stuff out too. So it's not just in our schools. We've got churches that are supportive of it because they're taking federal dollars. So anywhere the federal government has been able to buy you, that's what the string is, oh yeah, you have to now teach this. You have to now dance like this, and you now have to talk like this. And if you deviate, then, shame on you because you're not being a good citizen.
That's a good point when you talk about kids are confused, because that was another thing where my son had to do a survey, and he said, the principal came back and said, well, he's kind of on the borderline of risk. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, he could be depressed. So I went back to my son and I said, what exactly, why is your principal telling me that you're depressed or that you're at risk? And I said, what was the survey that you filled out? He said, basically, are you okay here at school? Do you feel safe? That whole,
it's a climate survey is what they're calling it. Yeah.
And then they ask, well, do you feel wanted? Do you feel like friends like you? Do you feel like people include you? So he's like, well, I don't feel like I know. I don't feel like I'm included sometimes, I guess, because well, my one friend, Joe, he says he's bi. Susie says she's gay. And then tomorrow they're flip-flop and they don't know what they are. And I think a lot of it has to do with the programming our kids are subjected to as well, because all that TikTok nonsense and just even programming. I'm watching some of the programming that my kids watch on Nickelodeon. There is a lot of content in there that should not even be discussed. They go as far as dressing up boys as girls, girls as boys. So yeah, kids are confused because they're shoving down their throat.
Right. Well, those story hours that have been in the news before, the funding for those comes from a federal grant that's to the libraries and museums. I don't know if you knew that or not. And part of the process is, okay, we're funding this. Now you can use the money for A, B, C, and D. And guess what's included? I told you the federal government is the biggest pimp out there. They're also the biggest race baiter out there.
Well, if they're the pimp, that makes our schools the whores for taking the money and doing this to our children.
Not only that, Stacy, but it makes our governors and our state school board of education. Now, I live here in North Carolina, and to the best of my knowledge, we're either the only state or one of the only states that made sure it differentiated public education from private education and homeschooling. But what we've seen happen, that separation that was so precious has been joined together. And that was done in 2013. And my youngest and I went before the General Assembly, and we testified as to why we needed to preserve the separation. And we were told by one of the sitting members who represented our state, no, we need to purposely blur the lines between public, private, and homeschooling, because if we do that, everyone will have more opportunity. But what they weren't taking into consideration was everybody has the amount of opportunity already in place, but we're not all supposed to be in the same zip code, as they like to say. We're not all supposed to have the same income level. We're not supposed to have all the same house or the same number of kids. I mean, that was why there was variety. That was why there were, you look back at the Bible, not everybody was rich. Not everybody was a ruler. And you were told, okay, if you happen to be a master, treat your employees, if you will, this way. If you're an employee, treat those in authority over you this way. Because they knew, God knew there were going to be different stations. But that was the beauty of it, because you can't all be a head. You can't all be the hands. You can't all be the feet. We can't all have the same job. But this is something that is totally against family. And this is what our government is preaching, is that everybody has to feel the same and look the same. And no, we don't. It's so aggravating to me that anyone would think that, oh yeah, because the government tells me that I'm going to send them here and they're going to get every opportunity they never had. it's such a sham, because what the government is doing is they're not giving you an opportunity, they're giving you an indentured servitude.
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
Well, I also find that a lot of the agenda hides the pedophiles. It hides the predators in these agendas so that these kids and the parents can't figure out who the predators are, because they want everyone thinking along the same lines.
Yeah.
And it's
yeah.
the same confusion.
Right.
And sexualization of kids. And
right.
as long as it's marketed appropriately and you get money behind it, nobody's saying no to it.
That's right, because, you know, it's that propaganda again, and our government is an expert in propaganda. Our government has lent some of its research and some of the research done by higher education in some private organizations to create a document that was supposedly formulated in the United Kingdom, but because we've had so much interjection into that particular document, it makes you wonder, is this really a joint effort? Because what we're seeing is that the contents of this document is called Mindspace, is all about government control, mind control over its people. And so when you go back and you look at the amount of American research that's gone into this, well, what does that tell you? If they're contributing to another country in this platform, they've been doing it here too.
So one of the parents reviewed some of the Common Core math in particular. Yep. And his assessment was even the layout of the books and how they teach math is confusing to the brain, so that there's really no mastery of how to do math in general. What can you tell us about Common Core, since you're the Common Core?
Okay, well, I can tell you it's not dead. Betsy DeVos was a big fat liar when she said it, you know. Every student did not kill it, it codified it. It codified the No Child Left Behind. It codified the the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. It also wrote in the Higher Education Act and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So right there is the shift away from true academics to workforce-based education. Because again, you're worth more in an economic dollar than you are in academic prowess. And so what I can tell you is that Common Core has been rebranded, recycled, and had a new dose of lipstick slapped on that pig so many times, it's not even funny. But what you can find is that there are certain curricular resources where you will still see the copyright. And the reason why is because the copyright didn't expire. The name got changed. The agenda didn't. The copyright is still making the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers millions of dollars. And I will tell you, the social and emotional garbage that was woven in the Common Core, that would show up in the language arts and that would show up in the math and all these other places that it really didn't need to be. By 2027, the social and emotional market, because it's now been turned into an educational gold mine, supposedly, will be in the billions of dollars. And all it is mind manipulation.
Wow. So what would you say would be a good starting point if parents are just now starting to pay attention and they want to start their research? I have people ask me all the time, where do you find the truth?
Okay, well, first of all, you can tap into people like myself, but, and this is a mistake, I don't want listeners to just, oh, okay, well, she can do it for me. I'm not always going to be here. At some point, there's going to be either I'm dead or I'm so incapacitated with arthritis that I'm not going to be able to do some of what I do now. But I'm going to keep going till I can, which is why maybe I'm not writing right now, but I'm still speaking. I can do that. Point of it is tap into people like me. Definitely. If you don't do anything else tonight, go to Charlotte Iserbeat's Deliberately Dumbing Down website. You can download her voluminous book, in sections, I believe it is, or you can pay out the nose through Amazon. I personally am not going to support Amazon, but the reason why I suggest Charlotte is because Charlotte is in her 90s. And when all the education garbage was hitting the fan back in Reagan's day, she was blowing the whistle. She's one of the very first who exposed the Project BEST, which is better education through technology. So she was one of the ones who exposed that. Okay, that attaches to big data, but it also goes into the social and emotional. It also ties into the Skinnerian workforce competency-based garbage that the Marxists love. She has been able to lay so much of a foundation that parents would be easily able to digest what she is exposing. Yes, it's dated information, but what we've seen is that in this agenda, it doesn't matter what the date is, the agenda is still the same. And we can see from looking at our past documentation like that, oh, stuff, it went from here and here we are now. Oh, I need to hurry up, get on the ball and help people out. So that would be a good place to go. So my blog is a good place to go. That's www.commoncorediva.com. Charlotte's is deliberately dumbing down. You also would need to start reading school board policy, showing up at the meetings. And if there's a policy you don't understand, start asking questions. Don't go to the school board going, can I see what you're teaching? You use your parental right to say, I am here to see what you are teaching. You make that declarative statement, okay? If you can, develop a relationship with your school board, because just showing up once a month and spouting off 3 minutes of why you're so ticked off is really not going to help solve anything. Yes, it will point to the problem, but if we really want to be unified, we've got to work with these people, because half the time the school boards are puppets. Mm-hmm. And if they aren't really in agreement with what's going on, and you certainly aren't in agreement with what's going on, it's time to have a conversation. So have that conversation, show up at the school board meeting, say your piece, do it respectfully, because they may be in on the game, they may not. But then call them the next morning. Hey, Joe, hey, Sue, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? Can we talk about this? Or can I come to your office and I have all these examples of this is why I'm so concerned over what my child is learning. So develop that, okay? Start looking at what your state board of education is doing. Start looking at the partners, start looking at the big corporations who are funding them, because as was brought up earlier, nonprofits are part of the problem, but they're not the only problem. Because what we're seeing with this agenda, what we're seeing in the name of COVID, what we saw with the implementation of the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement is that public-private partnerships, which is fascism 101, are creeping in and taking over everything. And the fact that it has so manipulated education from what it used to be to now being all privatized and government controlled. And this is a warning to those homeschoolers, because yes, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh yeah, I'll just pull them out and do it at home. But what we need to understand about the Every Student Succeeds Act is that it said all education must be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It did not stop to say all public school students, all private school students, all homeschool students. No, it said all students, and here's why. Because roped in with the Every Student Succeeds Act was the Higher Education Act, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the STEM Act, and all these other things, okay, with mandates on behavior interventions and all this. So what it was saying by implementing and mandating and codifying these other laws was that we've got you from cradle to grave, so that everyone is that lifelong learner. And as long as you can be termed a lifelong learner, you're what? A student. So this is not just K through 12 public education. This is a straitjacket for every citizen. So yeah, homeschool as freely as you can for as long as you can. But the minute you take special needs money, IEP money, IDEA funding, as soon as you take a public school course, as soon as you enroll in dual enrollment or early college or AP courses or IB courses, you're in.
I had a client use the word corporate fascism, and he said
Yeah.
it's worse than communism.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the driving force behind our children being the target for that workforce development because they
Mhm.
don't want to turn out entrepreneurs.
That's
They don't
right.
want to turn out business owners. You can't be controlled through those means. You are
That's
only controlled
Yep.
if you work for the government or if you work for a large global corporation, which we're seeing now. They
Yep.
can mandate their own policies right around your rights. You will do it,
Absolutely.
or you won't have a house, or you won't be able to put food on the table. You will
Yep.
behave. Those behavioral interventions as well that you're speaking of.
Yeah, and here's all I'm going to say about the behavior interventions. I know there are people who really need them, but to label every person as some sort of a mental nut job, that's not cool.
No.
That's not even right.